Hello everyone and welcome back to another Marvel Champions video. A bunch of new cards for StarLord were revealed on a stream. I believe the cards were in a foreign language. I'm not sure exactly which language, but those cards have been translated and there are now spoilers for those translated cards. The article says that it might not be 100% translation, so there might be some slight variance once the actual cards come out in a couple weeks. They're coming out on May 14th. But we're going to cover the cards that were revealed in this stream and that have been translated. But we're going to jump back and at least look at StarLord, Alter Ego, and Hero side to then kind of show what these new cards can do. So here we have Peter Quill. This is the Alter Ego side for StarLord. 3 recovery, hand size of 6 with 10 hit points. He's an outlaw and setup. Search your deck and discard pile for a copy of the Element Gun upgrade and add it to your hand and then shuffle your deck. So the Element Gun has actually been revealed, so we're going to get to that a little bit later in the video. But this allows you to, very much like with Captain America, basically draw up your hand, and if you get the Element Gun, discard it like you would the shield. And then after you draw up your hand, you can then go through your discard pile or your deck if you didn't draw the Element Gun and put it into your hand. And then after that, you're going to shuffle your deck. And then he has Smooth Talker, which is an action. Choose a card in your hand and swap that card with the top card of your deck. Limit once per round. So if you have a card that you can't use right away, you can just swap it out with whatever card is on top. Hopefully it's something better than the card that you basically put back on top. So that is StarLord's Alter Ego. We're going to go ahead and look at the hero side of him, and then we're going to look at the new cards. We'll be right back with the hero side for StarLord. Alright, and now we have StarLord on his hero side. So 2 thwart, 2 attack, 1 defense. He's a guardian. Hand size goes down to 5 and still 10 hit points. So each ally you control gains a guardian trait. That's important because he has a lot of cards that will interact with other guardian characters. So basically your allies, even if they're not guardians, basically become guardians. And then cards that affect guardians will then affect those other characters even if they aren't printed as guardians. So that's pretty good. And then he has the What Could Go Wrong interrupt. And this is very important for his deck because this deals with face down and counter cards. And there's a lot of cards in StarLord's deck that will do better the more face down and counter cards that you have. So as an interrupt, when you play a card from your hand, deal yourself 1 face down and counter card, reduce the resource cost to play that card by 3, limit once per round. That's huge with the Element Gun because that basically the Element Gun, we're going to get to it in a second, costs 3, so you can get the Element Gun out for free essentially. So and he has a lot of cards that deal with face down and counter cards, and it's limit once per round. So basically, you can just do this, get a face down and counter card, and then potentially play something that has a benefit from face down and counter cards and get more effect out of that card. So that is StarLord. We're now going to move into the new cards that were revealed. We'll be right back with those. Alright, and the first card up here we have is Nova Prime Richard Rider. It's an ally, 5 resource cost, 2 thwart with 1 incidental damage, 3 attack with 1 incidental damage. Comes in with 3 health, 3 hit points. He's aerial and also Nova Core. If you discard it, it gets a wild resource. And as a response, after you play Nova Prime from your hand, defeat a non-elite minion. So basically, he gets to defeat a minion without taking any kind of damage. 5 cost, kind of high, but also, again, 2 thwart, 3 attack with 3 health. So he can basically get off 3 attacks or 3 thwarts before he's defeated, depending on if you decide to block with him or not. But that could do, like that attack right there for just 1 is pretty good, especially if you have ways to keep your allies healed. And the 2 thwart is also very good. So that is Nova Prime. And again, I think this would work with StarLord. So if you use StarLord's ability, you can get Nova Prime out for free with the cost of taking a face down and counter card. That's something very important to remember with StarLord's deck is the first card he plays basically each round gets that resource reduction as well as getting that face down and counter card, which is a big risk versus reward thing with StarLord. It's very thematic to where he has these crazy schemes, these crazy plans that generally work, but there is sometimes a huge cost to doing the plans, and a lot of times that stuff kind of comes back to bite him. So again, using his ability with Nova Prime is very good because it's basically a 5 resource minion or ally, and you can get him out for free if you use StarLord's ability to do that. Let's move into our next card. Next up, we have Bold Maneuver. 2 cost generates a mental resource when you discard it. It's a thwart event, so hero action, thwart. remove 2 threat from a scheme, and then remove 2 threat from that scheme for each face down encounter card in front of you. So if you have a face down encounter card in front of you, you remove 2 threat, then you remove 2 threat again. That's pretty good. And then more face down encounter cards you have, you can get rid of a lot of threat with this, depending on how many face down encounter cards that you have. So again, big risk by getting those face down encounter cards, but sometimes big payoff here, like with potential to remove at least at minimum 2 threat and possibly more depending on how many face down encounter cards you have. So that is Bold Maneuver. Let's move into our next card. All right, next up we have Bad Boy, 3 cost support. It's a vehicle. It generates a physical resource if you discard it. It's a hero interrupt. So when you would take any amount of damage from a villain attack, discard this card to avoid all that damage, flip to your alter ego form, and draw 2 cards. So good way to prevent a bunch of damage. You then are forced to flip though, but then you also get to draw 2 cards, and if you flip over to Peter Quill's side, you can then use his Smooth Talker ability to switch out one of the cards in your hand with the top card of your deck. So that can be very good to prevent a bunch of damage. And then you can you could be in hero form, use this, prevent all the damage, flip him to the Peter Quill side. Again, draw 2 cards, maybe do his ability, and then on your next turn, just flip right back into hero form anyway, because you're allowed to flip forms once per round. So that is Bad Boy. Let's move into our next card. And here we have the Element Gun. So 3 cost upgrade, generates an energy resource when you discard it. It's tech and a weapon. It's restricted, so max 2 restricted cards per player. And this is where this gets really good. So hero action, exhaust Element Gun, and spend 1 resource of any type to deal 3 damage to an enemy. The attack gains piercing. So basically, it's just discard a card to do 3 damage, basically. Unless you also have, potentially have a resource generating card that you could basically just tap or exhaust to gain a resource. So I imagine cards like that are going to be very good for StarLord because he can basically exhaust this, expend the resource in some way, either from your hand or from a resource generating card, and then deal 3 damage with Pierce, which gets past toughness statuses, which is good. So that is, again, 3 costs, but again, with StarLord's ability, you can get it out for free if it's first card you play, and then you get that face down encounter card. So, very good card, and the fact that StarLord gets to basically dig this out of his deck before the game even starts, or discard pile, is also very huge. So that is the Element Gun. Let's move into our next card. Alright, next up we have the Flight Boots. It's a 2 cost upgrade. It's armor and tech. StarLord gains aerial. Also generates a mental resource if you discard it, and it's a hero interrupt. When StarLord will take any amount of damage, exhaust a Flight Boost to prevent 1 of that damage for each face down encounter card in front of you. So again, the more face down encounter cards you have, the better this is going to be because you're going to be able to prevent that much more damage. So if you have 1 face down encounter card, you prevent 2 because you prevent 1 right away from just exhausting the boots, and then if you have a face down encounter card, it's going to be 1 more on top of that. So basically, you're automatically going to be preventing 1, and then maybe even more depending on how many face down encounter cards that you have. That said, the more face down encounter cards you have means the more encounter cards you're going to have to deal with later in the round. So again, risk versus the reward with a lot of StarLord's cards. So those are the Flight Boots. Let's move into our next card. All right, next up we have Cosmo, and he is not specific to StarLord, so it's a 2 cost ally. Generates a mental resource if you discard it. He has 1 thwart, 1 attack with 1 incidental damage for each, 2 hit points. He's a guardian, and when Cosmo attacks or thwarts, name a card type, then discard the top card of any deck. If that card is the name type, Cosmo suffers no consequential damage listed under thwart or attack. So if I say, let's say I know exactly what's in the encounter deck, because maybe I played a card that let me rearrange those cards, or at least look at the top card, and let's say it's a treachery. So I can say when Cosmo either attacks or thwarts, I can say like it's a treachery card. Discard, let's see, it discards it, I believe. Yeah, discard the top card of it, and basically if it matches what you said, he takes no damage from his attack or thwart. Because like normally, if you attack or thwart, he takes 1 consequential damage, and then if you name the correct card, he takes no consequential damage. So that is Cosmo. So that is a especially again like decks that allow you to, or cards that allow you to look at the top card of the deck or know exactly what is there. Even with StarLord's or Peter Quill's ability to place a card from your draw a card and then place a card back on your deck, you know exactly what type of card is there. If it's a card that you don't really want to particularly play, you can just use that, name it with Cosmo when he attacks or thwarts, and then know exactly what card's going to be there, so he suffers no damage. So that is Cosmo. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have CITT. It's a 2-cost support vehicle. It's a hero action. Exhaust it and spend 2 resources of any type to ready a Guardian character. Also generates a wild resource when you discard it. This is pretty good. So basically, 2 resources to ready a Guardian character, which could be an ally, it could be your hero side, it could be one of your teammates if you're playing with other players that are playing Guardians. And again, only 2 resources to do this, and then basically you just spend 2 to ready a character. That could be huge, especially if you have other things that give other characters Guardian that aren't normally Guardians. You can then use this with them as well. So that is CITT. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Adam Warlock. It's a 3-cost ally. Generates a physical resource if you discard it. 1 thwart, 1 attack with 1 consequential damage each. He has aerial and he also has Mystic. And he has 3 hit points. And in response, after he attacks or thwarts, discard 1 card from your hand at random. If that card's printed resource has a physical resource, remove 2 threat from a scheme. If it has an energy resource, you heal 3 damage from a hero. Mental resource, deal 3 damage to an enemy. Or wild resource, choose one of the above options. So you can choose any of the other 3. So kind of somewhat reminiscent of the Hulk card, depending on what resource was shown. Hulk would do certain things, but one of them would cause you to, like, I believe, like, discard him as well. So luckily, Adam Warlock doesn't have anything like that. But 3 pretty big options here. So you either remove 2 threat, heal 3, or deal 3 damage. And then if you get a wild resource, you get to choose which one you need. So if you really need threat removed, you obviously do that. If you need to heal damage, that's an option. If you need to deal damage, that's another option. Again, 3 resources to get him out. You can potentially get him out for cheaper with things that reduce the cost of allies, or maybe even with StarLord's ability. So that is Adam Warlock. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Beta Ray Bill. 5 resource cost ally, 1 thwart, 3 attack with 1 consequential damage each. 4 health. He has the Asgard trait. Again, not specific to StarLord, so if you want to run a other basically leadership deck, you can go right in those. Again, generates a physical resource if you discard him. And response, after Beta Ray Bill attacks and defeats a minion, remove 2 threat from the main scheme. So, again, 1 thwart, not amazing for that, but his 3 attack is pretty good. And then he also has potential ways to remove threat when defeating minions. So that is Beta Ray Bill. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Yondu, 4-cost ally, 2 thwart for 1 consequential damage, 1 attack, 2 health. He's a guardian, generates an energy resource when you discard him. And Yondu's basic attack gains ranged, and they ignore retaliate. Huge thing of Yondu. Again, you can get him out for cheaper with certain cards, or even with StarLord's ability, but no consequential damage from his attack. That, I don't know if any other minions or allies have that. There might be some, but this is pretty huge because you can basically, if you have ways to increase his attack, he can basically stay out indefinitely as long as you don't use him to block or he doesn't take damage from some other source. But the fact that he has, again, no consequential damage on his attack is only 1, but the fact that you can basically keep him out and just ping damage the entire game without him losing health is just huge here. Especially if you can get his attack, increase his attack in some way. So that is Yondu. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Aerial Supremacy, 2-cost event. Generates a physical resource when you discard it. It's aerial and a tactic. And as a hero action, choose up to X enemies, where X is the number of aerial characters you control. Deal 3 damage to each chosen enemy. So aerial didn't do a lot early in the game, and now there's actually cards that will do more depending on if something has the aerial trait or not. So certain characters are going to have aerial. So let's say you have 2 characters that have the aerial trait out. You get to choose 2 enemies, where that's the number of aerial characters, and then deal 3 damage to each of the chosen enemies based on the number of aerial characters you have, heroes or allies. So That's huge, and 3 damage for 2, especially if you can spread it across a lot of different enemies, is pretty big. So that is Aerial Supremacy. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Target Practice. It's a 0-cost support. It's a skill, and as an interrupt, when an ally with a weapon upgrade makes an attack, discard Target Practice. That ally receives +2 for that attack. Again, we just talked about Yondu. If Yondu has a weapon upgrade on him, you can then basically discard this to give Yondu +2 attack, and then of course he won't take any consequential damage from that attack because he doesn't have any consequential damage on his attack value. So this could use that to pump his damage. If he has a weapon on him, that might pump it even more. So that could be pretty big. And again, it's a 0-cost support, so you can basically just get it onto a character and then get that character a weapon. And then once you do, you can discard this to increase their attack. So that is Target Practice. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have a Laser Pistol. It's a 1-cost upgrade. It's tech and a weapon. It generates a physical resource if you discard it. Attached to a Guardian ally, max 1 per ally. The attack ally gets +1 attack, and their attacks gain overkill. Again, throw this on Yondu. He's got 2 attack with overkill. And then with something like Target Practice, he's got 2 attack already. That attack is going to do 4 damage with no consequential damage. So that is the Laser Pistol. We're going to move into our next card. And I believe we're moving into the cards now that will come with StarLord that can go into any deck. I believe StarLord is going to be a leadership deck, but here is the card for aggression. So Power Dive, 4-cost event, generates a physical resource if you discard it. It's aerial and an attack. Play only if your hero has the aerial trait. Hero action, deal 7 damage to an enemy. Deal 1 damage to all other enemies. So hit the strongest enemy for 7 and then do 1 to each other enemy, as long as you do have to have aerial to have it. But there's upgrades now. Certain characters are going to have aerial, like things like the rocket boots are going to give you aerial, I believe. So that is Power Dive. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the Pulse Grenade, 2-cost upgrade. It's a weapon. Generates an energy resource if you discard it. And as a hero action, attack, discard the Pulse Grenade, and choose an enemy. Discard the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. For each boost icon discarded this way, deal 1 damage to that enemy. So pretty big. Depending on, it could also do 0 damage based on how many. If you discard 2 cards and there's no boost icons on any of them, it can hit for 0. It could also it could be very swingy to where it can hit for a lot. But if you have a way to rearrange the encounter deck and put certain cards on top, you would then kind of know exactly what is there and when would be a good time to use the Pulse Grenade. So like let's say you have Shadows of the Past up there and another one that gives you 2 boosts. You discard Shadows of the Past. That does 3. You discard. I think Shadows of the Past is 3. A lot of the obligations are also 3, or 3 boosts. You discard the other card. That is 2 boosts. So then you're dealing 5 damage to an enemy, and also getting rid of cards that you potentially don't want to show up as encounter cards as well. So maybe Shadows of the Past is a good one to always get rid of, so you don't have to deal with your Nemesis minion. Anything like maybe potentially get rid of your obligation as well, so you don't have to deal with that. So it allows you to, if you exactly know with what cards are on top, you can then potentially hit for a lot of damage with this. Again, it could backfire and do 0, or maybe only 1 or 2 damage, depending on what cards are on top of the encounter deck. But good way to get through the encounter deck, and good way to basically do a bunch of damage if you know exactly what's there. So that is the Pulse Grenade. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have our Justice card here. This is Agile Flight, 3-cost event. Generates a mental resource if you discard it. It's aerial and a thwart. Play only if your hero has the aerial trait. And hero action, thwart, remove a total of 5 threat divided among schemes as you choose. So pretty big here. So normally a lot of times when you use a thwart, you have to choose a scheme to go against. There are some cards that allow you to kind of pick and choose where the threat comes off of. But this allows you to remove a total of 5 threat divided among however many schemes you have in play. So that's pretty good. Good way to get rid of a lot of threat at once. Or let's say you have a crisis you need to deal with, and then there's another scheme with 3 threat. You can deal with the crisis. Let's say the crisis has 2 threat on it. You can deal with the crisis and then also remove threat from a different scheme. So that is Agile Flight. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Constant Vigilance. It's a 2-cost event. It's aerial and a skill. Play only if your hero has the aerial trait. Also generates a mental resource if you discard it. Hero action, ready your hero and remove 2 threat from the main scheme. Pretty good. So your hero is aerial. You pay 2. Ready the hero. So basically, let's say after you attack, after you thwart, after you do something, you can just pay 2 resources, ready that hero, and then also remove 2 threat from the scheme on top of it, which is pretty good. So that is Constant Vigilance, and that's our protection card from StarLord's deck. Next up, let's move into our next card. We are moving into our StarLord kind of like Obligation and Nemesis deck. So his obligation is Exile, give to the Peter Quill player. You may flip to Alter Ego form to choose to either exhaust Peter Quill and remove Exile from the game, or discard an element gun from play. If you cannot place 3 threat on the main scheme, discard this obligation. Comes in with, and also has 2 boosts. So depending on if you don't want to lose your element gun or put threat on the scheme, you might want to just exhaust Peter Quill to remove this. But also, let's say you do have an element gun and you don't want to discard it, or I guess if you can't, I guess if you have the element gun, you have to discard it. So to me, the element gun is such a huge card that discarding it is probably not going to be a good idea. So in this situation, I would probably just choose to exhaust Peter Quill and then get rid of the obligation. Because to me, discarding an element gun is bad, probably not good. And let's say you don't have an element gun, also placing 3 threat on the main scheme is also not great. So I think for me in this situation, I would choose to exhaust him and remove it. But I guess it depends on the situation. So that is Obligation. We're going to move into our next card here. Next up, we have the Budding Crime Syndicate. This is a side scheme. Let's see what we have. It has Hinder. Hinder introduced in Galaxy's Most Wanted. So Hinder 2, when revealed, place 2 threat per player here. Also comes in with 2 threat per player. Has 3 boost icons, and when it's in play, it gives you an additional encounter card. So basically, it comes in if you're doing it with solo play, comes in with 4 threat, and the penalty of having to get an additional encounter card. Might not actually be terrible for StarLord because basically, if he's getting additional encounter cards, if you're doing a solo and all the encounter cards are going to him anyway, he has those cards that will affect or that are affected by the number of face-down encounter cards. So that might not be terrible for StarLord because he has got that ability where, or certain cards do additional things depending on how many face-down encounter cards you have. But also, though, more face-down encounter cards means more things you're going to have to deal with, more potential for stuff to go wrong, and so on. So that is the Budding Crime Syndicate. We're going to move into our next card. We have the Spitori Cunning, which is a Treachery. When it's revealed, discard 1 card at random from your hand, take 1 damage, and place 1 threat on the main scheme. So basically, you lose a card, you take damage, and you put a threat on the scheme. So that to me isn't a terrible Treachery. That could probably be dealt with not too badly. So there's probably going to be 2 of these in the deck, I would imagine. Let's see what that was. Card 1. Yeah, card 1, card 3. Next card here is card 2. So this is Mr. Ninth. Let's see, Minion. 2 scheme to attack. StarLord's basically StarLord's Nemesis comes in with 6 health. Retaliate 1. So basically, when he gets attacked, he pings damage. And first Treachery card he revealed during the villain phase gains Surge. So you get a Treachery card, and then you basically get to do another card on top of that. And again, 6 health. So it looks like I think cards 3 and maybe 4 are going to be those Treacheries because I imagine there'll be more than one of these in the deck. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But again, that's Mr. Ninth, and that is the last card revealed from this article. There'll be a link in the description where you can check out the article out. These are the translated versions of the cards that were revealed on a foreign stream, or the languages of the cards were foreign. So again, the article states that these translations may not be 100% accurate, but I believe they're probably pretty close. So that's going to do it for this video. Again, StarLord and Gamora coming out on May 14th. As more cards get revealed, I'll be sure to be covering them for StarLord or other heroes as well. Again, that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching, and take care.